Let me create a detailed outline for your story first. Then I'll write the complete story. Ryan, 28, introduces himself as someone who once had a promising future in his father's construction business. Brief mention of the explosive argument where his father screamed at him to get out and never come back. Hint at leaving with nothing but the clothes on his back and $73 in his wallet. Foreshadow his father having to face him again weeks later in completely changed circumstances. End with a tease about how sometimes being forced to start over is the best thing that can happen. Include call to action for viewers to subscribe, and share where they're watching from. Ryan's background. Growing up as the son of Robert Matthews, owner of Matthews Construction, the expectation that Ryan would take over the family business someday. His strained relationship with his demanding perfectionist father. Ryan's mother, Sarah, who passed away when he was 15, leaving him without his buffer. The introduction of stepmother Diane 2 years later and her subtle undermining. Ryan's interest in architectural design versus his father's focus on practical construction. His attempts to modernize the business met with resistance and ridicule. The family dynamic, Ryan always feeling he had to prove himself, never measuring up. His younger half-brother Jake, 18, who became the favored son. Recent tensions as Ryan proposed implementing new sustainable building practices. Robert's old-school approach versus Ryan's forward-thinking ideas. The growing resentment as Ryan's suggestions were repeatedly dismissed. The company losing a major contract to a competitor with greener building practices. Ryan's "I told you so" moment leading to increased tension. The big client meeting where Ryan came prepared with a comprehensive presentation. Robert sabotaging the presentation by dismissing Ryan's ideas in front of clients. The heated argument back at the office that spilled into their home. Diane fueling the fire with comments about Ryan's disrespect. Jake watching silently, not intervening. Robert's explosive rage when Ryan suggested starting his own division within the company. The fateful words, "Get out and never come back. You're no son of mine." Ryan's initial shock and disbelief thinking his father would calm down. Diane packing Ryan's essentials in a duffel bag, rushing him out. The realization that his father meant what he said when he found the locks changed. Ryan's attempts to call and reconcile met with silence. The humiliation of being cut off from company accounts and credit cards. Finding himself homeless at 28 with no immediate support system. The first night in a cheap motel reality setting in. Taking inventory of his resources, limited cash car clothes, and his laptop. Reaching out to old college friend Michael, who offers his couch temporarily. The mental struggle, anger, hurt, disbelief, and determination. Applying for jobs, but facing rejection due to lack of references. The awkward explanation when potential employers call Matthews Construction. Running into former clients who heard rumors about his firing. The financial strain as savings dwindle rapidly. Selling his watch to pay for a month at a cheap extended stay motel. Swallowing pride to take a basic job at a local lumberyard. The physical toll of manual labor after years of office work. Using evenings to develop his own architectural designs. The unexpected connection with lumberyard owner Tom Wilson. Tom recognizing Ryan's knowledge of construction materials. The first small break, Tom offering Ryan more hours and responsibility. Ryan's systematic approach to rebuilding his life. Creating a portfolio of innovative eco-friendly home designs at night. Learning the supply chain side of construction from Tom. Networking with contractors who visit the lumberyard. Meeting Emma, an environmental consultant who's impressed by his designs, their partnership. Emma's connections with eco-conscious clients, and Ryan's construction knowledge, the formation of Green Build Design as a consulting service, first client taking a chance on their services for a small renovation, the successful completion leading to referrals, working out of a corner in Tom's office, gradually building clientele, Emma suggesting they enter a sustainable design competition, late nights perfecting their submission while still working full-time jobs, the growing reputation in the local industry for innovative, cost-effective green solutions, running into Jake at a building supply convention, the awkward conversation where Jake reveals the business is struggling, Ryan's mixed feelings, vindication versus concern for his father's legacy, the regional sustainable building design competition, preparing their presentation on a shoestring budget, discovering Matthews Construction is also entering the competition, the pressure to prove himself against his father's company, arriving at the convention center, seeing his father across the room, Robert's cold shoulder and dismissive attitude, the presentation Ryan showcasing his innovative design approach, Judges' positive reaction to Greenbuild's comprehensive sustainability plans, Matthews Construction's dated presentation failing to impress, the announcement of finalists, including Greenbuild but not Matthews, Robert's visible shock and anger at being outperformed, local media coverage highlighting Ryan as an industry innovator, a major developer approaching Ryan after the competition, the offer to design and consult on an eco-friendly apartment complex, the validation of receiving his first substantial contract, moving Greenbuild into a small but proper office, hiring their first employee, a recent architecture graduate, the bittersweet success knowing his father is aware of his achievements, Emma's encouragement to focus on the future, not the past, Ryan's growing confidence in his own vision and abilities, 3 months after being kicked out, Ryan's business gaining momentum, Greenbuild winning the regional competition, advancing to nationals, local business journal featuring Ryan in a Rising Entrepreneurs article, the unexpected call from Jake asking to meet, the coffee shop meeting, Jake revealing Matthews Construction is in serious trouble, multiple clients canceling contracts seeking more sustainable options, the company's reputation suffering after losing the competition, financial troubles mounting, potential bankruptcy looming, Jake's request. Would Ryan consider helping save the family business? Ryan's conflicted feelings about his father's situation, the revelation that Robert doesn't know Jake is reaching out, Ryan agreeing to look at the company finances out of loyalty to his mother's memory, the shocking discovery of how badly the business has deteriorated, creating a proposal for how Matthews Construction could be salvaged, Jake arranging a meeting with Robert without telling him Ryan will be there, the tense reunion at the Matthews Construction office, Robert's initial anger at seeing Ryan, Jake's ultimatum: listen to Ryan's proposal or lose his support too, the awkward presentation of Ryan's rescue plan, Robert's struggle between pride and the reality of potential bankruptcy, Diane's unexpected support for Ryan's ideas, motivated by financial self-preservation, the conditional agreement Ryan will help, but changes must be implemented, setting clear boundaries and expectations for a professional relationship, Ryan maintaining his separate business while consulting for his father. 6 months after the confrontation, the transformed landscape of both businesses, Matthews Construction implementing Ryan's sustainable practices, slowly recovering, Greenbuild Design thriving. With a staff of 8 and major projects underway, the professional working relationship between Ryan and Robert, small steps toward personal reconciliation, though full trust not yet rebuilt, family dinners resuming with tension, but also moments of connection, Ryan's reflection on how being kicked out forced him to find his own path, the National Sustainable Design Competition approaching, both companies entering but now as collaborators on a joint project, Robert's gradual acknowledgement of Ryan's vision and expertise, the uncomfortable but necessary conversations about past hurts, Robert's partial apology acknowledging his role in the rift, Ryan's maturity in accepting the limited reconciliation offered, the father-son presentation at the national competition showcasing their complementary strengths, winning second place, a victory for both their professional relationship, Ryan's new confidence and identity separate from his father's shadow, purchasing his own home symbolizing his independence, the lesson learned about standing on his own feet versus following predetermined paths, Tom from the lumberyard becoming a mentor and investor in Greenbuild, Emma becoming not just a business partner but a romantic interest, family gathering where Robert awkwardly but sincerely acknowledges Ryan's achievements, the understanding that being forced to leave was painful but necessary for growth, Ryan's final reflection on forgiveness, independence, and creating his own legacy, looking toward the future with optimism, knowing he built something truly his own, closing thoughts on how sometimes rejection becomes redirection to a better path. This detailed outline provides a comprehensive roadmap for developing a 10,000-word story that follows the emotional journey requirements while maintaining logical plot development and character growth. The story features a clear hook, escalating tension, emotional climax, and satisfying resolution with meaningful life lessons. Now I'll write the complete story based on this outline. I'm Ryan, 28 years old, and until 4 months ago, I was the heir apparent to Matthews Construction, my father's company. I'd worked there since high school, learning every aspect of the business, preparing for the day I'd take over. Then came the argument that changed everything. Dad's face turned crimson as he pointed to the door and screamed words I never thought I'd hear. "Get out and never come back, you're no son of mine." I left with nothing but the clothes on my back, $73 in my wallet, and a decade of construction knowledge in my head. What I didn't know then was that sometimes being forced to start over is the best thing that can happen to you. Before I tell you how my father had to face me again just weeks later, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Sometimes our greatest setbacks lead to our most unexpected comebacks. Matthews Construction has been a fixture in our community for over 30 years. My father, Robert Matthews, built it from the ground up, turning a small handyman service into a respected regional construction company with 50 employees and multi-million-dollar contracts. Growing up, the business was as much a part of our family identity as our last name. "This will all be yours someday," Dad would say, his hand heavy on my shoulder as we walked through construction sites. Even as a kid, I understood this wasn't just a promise, it was an expectation. My future had been mapped out before I could even spell construction. My mother, Sarah, was the buffer between Dad's demanding nature and my childhood. She'd gently remind him when he pushed too hard or expected too much from a 10-year-old. "He's just a boy, Robert," she'd say with that calm smile that could diffuse my father's intensity. "There's time." But time wasn't on our side. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive cancer when I was 14, and by my 15th birthday, she was gone. Without her mediating presence, my relationship with Dad became increasingly strained. He buried himself in work, and I was left to navigate adolescence while grieving my mother and trying to live up to impossible expectations. 2 years after Mom died, Dad introduced me to Diane, a woman he'd met through a business associate. 6 months later, they were married. Diane wasn't openly hostile, but she had a talent for subtle undermining. "Ryan certainly tries his best, doesn't he?" she would say when I failed to meet one of Dad's standards. Or, "It must be difficult for you, Robert, wondering if Ryan will ever have your drive." Despite the challenging home environment, I excelled in school and genuinely developed an interest in construction, though not exactly in the way my father envisioned. While Dad focused on practical building techniques and traditional methods, I became fascinated with architectural design, particularly sustainable building practices. I completed a degree in architectural design with a minor in environmental sustainability, believing I could bring fresh perspectives to the family business. Upon graduation, I joined Matthews Construction full-time, working my way through different departments to learn the business comprehensively. I wasn't asking for handouts, I wanted to earn my position through knowledge and innovation. "We need to evolve," I told my father during one of our Monday morning meetings. "Sustainable construction isn't just environmentally responsible, it's where the market is heading. Clients are asking for it." Dad would dismiss these suggestions with a wave of his hand. "Trendy nonsense that adds cost without value. We build solid structures the way we always have. That's what clients really want." This fundamental disagreement became the backdrop for increasing tension. Each time I proposed implementing energy-efficient systems or sustainable materials, Dad would shut me down often in front of other employees. "When you've been in this business as long as I have, you'll understand what works and what's just fancy talk," he'd say, undermining my credibility with our team. The situation became more complicated when my half-brother Jake turned 18 and started working at the company part-time while attending community college. Unlike me, Jake had no real interest in construction or the family business, but he knew how to tell Dad exactly what he wanted to hear. "Ryan's ideas are interesting, but Dad's approach has worked for 30 years," became his standard response during disagreements, positioning himself as the reasonable middle ground while effectively siding with our father. Diane, of course, championed her son at every opportunity. "Jake has such natural business instincts," she would comment at family dinners. "He understands that innovation needs to serve profit, not the other way around." Despite these frustrations, I remained committed to the company. I believed that eventually Dad would see the value in my proposals, especially as client requests for sustainable options increased. I documented everything, creating detailed presentations on potential cost savings and market advantages of green building practices. We could be leading this shift instead of following it, I argued. Imagine Matthews Construction being known as the pioneer of sustainable building in the region. Dad's resistance only seemed to harden. This business supported this family by doing things the right way. Your fancy ideas might work in theory, but this is the real world. We're not gambling our reputation on unproven methods. What he couldn't see was that his proven methods were quickly becoming outdated. Competitors were adopting the very practices I advocated for advertising them prominently and winning contracts we would have secured in the past. The company's annual holiday party 3 months before our final confrontation showcased the growing divide. As we celebrated another year of business, Dad gave his traditional speech thanking longtime employees and highlighting major projects. When acknowledging my contributions, he said, "And Ryan continues to bring enthusiasm to the team, though sometimes I think he forgets we're builders, not tree huggers." The room filled with uncomfortable chuckles while I forced a smile, feeling the sting of public dismissal. Later that evening, one of our project managers approached me at the bar. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think your sustainability proposals make a lot of sense. My brother works for Westridge Builders, and they're going all in on green construction. They can barely keep up with demand." His words confirmed what I already knew. Dad's resistance wasn't just costing us market share. It was threatening the company's future. But how could I make him see what was happening when he refused to even consider my perspective? As the new year began, the consequences of this divide became increasingly apparent. Matthews Construction lost a bid for a major commercial development to a smaller competitor specifically because our proposal lacked the environmental considerations the client requested. It was the third such loss in 6 months. "This is exactly what I've been warning about," I said during the postmortem meeting. "We need to adapt or we'll keep losing contracts." Dad's face reddened. "What we need is fewer excuses and more focus on what's worked for 30 years. These clients will learn their lesson when these green builders cut corners to meet impossible promises." The tension between us had reached a breaking point, though neither of us realized just how close we were to the edge. The coming weeks would change everything, not just for our relationship, but for the future of Matthews Construction and my own life path. The project that ultimately became our breaking point should have been straightforward: a renovation and expansion of a local credit union. Matthews Construction had done similar projects dozens of times, but this client specifically requested sustainable elements in their expansion, including solar panels, advanced insulation, and water conservation systems. I saw this as our opportunity to implement the changes I'd been advocating for on a smaller, manageable scale. I spent weekends researching suppliers and creating detailed plans that would incorporate sustainable elements while maintaining the budget parameters. The morning of the client presentation, I arrived early, setting up my materials in the conference room. Dad walked in, glanced at my presentation boards, and frowned. "What's all this?" "I've prepared a comprehensive proposal addressing the client's sustainability requests," I explained, trying to contain my excitement. "I've sourced materials that won't blow the budget and calculated the long-term savings they'll see in operating costs." "This isn't what we discussed," Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "But it's what the client asked for. If we don't offer these elements, they'll go elsewhere." The clients arrived before Dad could respond, forcing him to table his objections. Throughout my presentation, I could feel his disapproval radiating beside me. But the clients were engaged and responsive, asking thoughtful questions, and nodding with approval at the proposed solutions. Just as I was explaining the return on investment for the solar installation, Dad cleared his throat and interrupted. "While my son's ideas are certainly creative, Matthews Construction believes in proven methods that won't extend your timeline or introduce untested elements." The room went silent. I stood frozen, watching him systematically dismantle everything I'd presented, portraying my carefully researched proposals as risky and impractical. The clients exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly confused by the contradictory messages. After the meeting, which ended with vague promises to refine the proposal, I followed Dad into his office and closed the door behind us. "What was that?" I demanded, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You completely undermined me in front of the clients." "You undermine this company by presenting ideas we haven't approved," he shot back. Who do you think you are changing our approach without authorization? I'm the person trying to save this company from becoming obsolete. We've lost 3 major contracts because we refuse to adapt. The argument escalated quickly with years of accumulated frustration fueling both sides. Dad called my ideas impractical and accused me of trying to reinvent a business I didn't fully understand. I called him stubborn and short-sighted, unwilling to see the changing landscape of our industry. By the time we reached home that evening, the tension was palpable. Diane and Jake watched silently as we continued our argument over dinner. Perhaps Ryan should start his own company if he's so convinced of his approach. Diane suggested, her tone reasonable, but her words calculated to provoke. Maybe I should, I responded, pushed beyond caution by hours of frustration. Or I could develop a separate division within Matthews Construction focused on sustainable building. We could target a different market segment without disrupting the traditional business. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. There will be no separate division. There will be no undermining of the business I built. If you can't respect how we operate, then maybe you don't belong here at all. Robert, Diane said softly, placing her hand on his arm. Ryan clearly doesn't appreciate everything you've done for him. Perhaps it's time he learned some independence. That was the spark that ignited the explosion. Dad stood up, pointing toward the door. Get out and never come back. You're no son of mine. The words hung in the air, shocking everyone at the table. Even Jake looked uncomfortable, staring at his plate. Dad, you don't mean that, I said, still believing this was just another heated moment that would pass. I've never been more serious. If you think you know better than 30 years of experience, then go prove it. But not under my roof and not in my company. I looked to Jake for support, but he avoided my gaze. Diane was already clearing the table as if the matter was settled. The finality in Dad's tone left me speechless. I stood up slowly and walked to my room, half expecting him to follow and continue the argument. Instead, I heard the television turn on in the living room, normal programming resuming as if nothing extraordinary had happened. 20 minutes later, Diane knocked on my door holding a duffel bag. I've packed some essentials for you, she said with artificial concern. It's probably best if you go tonight. Give your father some space to cool down. This is ridiculous, I said. I've lived here since coming back from college. All my things. You can arrange to collect the rest later, she interrupted. Right now, Robert needs you to respect his wishes. Stunned and increasingly angry, I took the bag and walked out, certain that by tomorrow, this would be resolved. I checked into a nearby motel, sending Dad a text that we could talk when he was calmer. No response came that night, nor the next morning. When I drove back to the house, my key no longer worked in the lock. Through the window, I could see Diane on the phone. She looked directly at me, but made no move to open the door. Later that day, my company email stopped working, and by evening, I discovered my access card to the building had been deactivated. The company credit card I used for business expenses was declined when I tried to extend my motel stay. The message was unmistakable. Dad had meant every word. I was out of the family, the home, and the business I'd worked in for nearly a decade. At 28, I found myself effectively homeless, unemployed, and cut off from everything I had built my identity around. The first few days passed in a blur of disbelief and frantic planning. I stretched my meager cash reserves by moving from the motel to the cheapest extended stay accommodation I could find, a dingy room with a kitchenette and the persistent smell of old cigarettes. Each night I would check my phone expecting to see a message from Dad or Jake, some acknowledgement that things had gone too far. The silence was deafening. Taking inventory of my resources was sobering. I had $73 in cash, my car thankfully paid off. The clothes Diane had packed mostly casual wear with only one proper business outfit, my laptop and phone, a decade of construction knowledge, no job, no references, and a resume with only one employer who now wouldn't even confirm my employment. I reached out to Michael, a college friend who lived about 40 minutes away. We hadn't been close in recent years, but he responded immediately to my abbreviated explanation of the situation. My couch is yours for as long as you need it, he offered. It's not much, but it's better than paying for a motel. His generosity gave me breathing room to figure out next steps. Each morning, I would leave his apartment before he woke up and spend the day at a local library applying for jobs and trying to formulate a plan. The rejections piled up quickly. I see you worked for Matthews Construction, one interviewer said, checking her notes. When I called for a reference, they said they had no record of your employment in a management capacity. My face burned with humiliation. I'm Robert Matthews' son. We had a disagreement. I can provide project documentation showing my involvement. She gave me a sympathetic but dismissive smile. Family businesses can be complicated. We'll keep your resume on file. I knew what that meant. No one wanted to get in the middle of what they perceived as a family squabble, especially when the father was a well-known businessman in the community. The financial reality became increasingly pressing. Michael was generous, but I couldn't impose indefinitely. I sold my watch a college graduation gift from my mother's parents to secure a month's rent at a small studio apartment and buy some groceries. The apartment was barely more than a room, but it was mine, a base from which to rebuild. Swallowing my pride, I applied for a position at Wilson's Lumberyard, a supplier Matthews Construction occasionally used. The job was basic, moving inventory, loading customer vehicles, and managing stock, and paid less than half what I'd earned before. But it was something, and I needed something badly. Tom Wilson, the owner, eyed me suspiciously during the interview. You're Robert's boy, aren't you? Bit overqualified to be hauling lumber, wouldn't you say? I need the work, mister. Wilson, I said simply. And I know your inventory better than most. I've been specifying materials for projects for years. He hired me on a trial basis, clearly expecting me to quit when something better came along. What he didn't expect was my dedication to proving myself. The physical labor was grueling after years of office work. My hands blistered, my back ached, and I collapsed into bed each night exhausted. But there was something purifying about the simplicity of the work, moving materials, helping customers, learning the business from an entirely different angle. In the evenings, despite my fatigue, I would open my laptop and work on design concepts. Without the constraints of Dad's traditional approach, I allowed myself to explore innovative, sustainable building methods I'd only been able to research theoretically before. I created detailed renderings of energy-efficient homes, commercial spaces with living walls and solar integration, and retrofitting plans for existing structures. This work was purely speculative with no clients or funding, but it kept my skills sharp and provided a creative outlet for the knowledge I'd accumulated. It also kept hope alive that somehow I could find my way back to the career I'd trained for. Tom noticed my knowledge base quickly. When contractors came in with questions about materials for specific applications, I could provide detailed information about performance characteristics, installation requirements, and alternatives. After a particularly impressive exchange with a custom home builder, Tom called me into his office. You know more than you let on, he said, leaning back in his chair. Been watching you explain things to customers who've been building longer than you've been alive, and they're listening. Construction materials have always interested me, I said cautiously. Seems to me you're wasted in the yard. I need someone to manage special orders and work with contractors on material specifications. Pay's not great, but it's better than hauling lumber. Interested. This small promotion was a lifeline, not just financially, but professionally. It positioned me to interact with builders and contractors, keeping me connected to the industry. I accepted immediately, grateful for the opportunity and the validation of my knowledge. One condition, Tom added. You tell me what really happened with you and your old man. Town this size rumors fly. Rather hear it straight. So I told him the unvarnished truth about the conflict over sustainable building practices and the blow-up that followed. Tom listened without comment, nodding occasionally. Robert's always been set in his ways, he said finally. Built a good business, but times change. People asking for different things these days. Been ordering a lot more of those eco-friendly materials myself. That conversation marked a turning point. Tom became something of a mentor, sharing his observations about changing customer preferences and introducing me to contractors who were interested in green building. The lumberyard became not just employment, but a hub of industry connections. One of those connections would change everything. Emma Carter, an environmental consultant who worked with builders on LEED certification, came to the yard looking for specific materials for a client's project. When she couldn't find exactly what she needed, I suggested alternatives and explained their performance characteristics in detail. You know a lot for a lumberyard manager, she observed, studying me with interest. I used to be in construction management, I replied, giving her the simplified version of my background. Specialized in sustainable building design. Really? Her eyes lit up. I have clients constantly looking for designers who understand both traditional construction and sustainable practices. Most architects create beautiful, eco-friendly designs that are impractical to build or way over budget. We exchanged contact information, and 2 days later, Emma called with a proposition. She had a client renovating a small commercial space who wanted green elements but was overwhelmed by the process. Would I be willing to consult on the project, helping translate sustainable design concepts into practical construction specifications? The opportunity was exactly what I needed, a chance to use my skills and begin rebuilding my professional identity. I spent every evening for a week preparing a comprehensive proposal, identifying cost-effective sustainable elements, and creating a phased implementation plan that would work with the client's budget constraints. The client was impressed enough to hire us as consultants, marking the unofficial beginning of what would soon become Greenbuild Design. The fee was modest, but the validation was priceless. Working alongside Emma, who brought environmental expertise and client connections, I found myself energized in a way I hadn't been at Matthews Construction in years. "We make a good team," Emma remarked after our first successful project meeting. "You understand both sides, the construction realities and the sustainability goals." "It's what I always wanted to do at my father's company," I admitted. "Bridge that gap." "His loss," she said simply. "Our gain." With this first client successfully underway, and Tom allowing me to use a corner of his office for my consulting work, I began to see a path forward, one I was forging myself rather than following in my father's footsteps. The irony wasn't lost on me. Being forced out of the family business had finally given me the freedom to pursue the vision I'd been fighting for all along. Over the next few weeks, Emma and I formalized our partnership, establishing Greenbuild Design as a consulting service, specializing in practical, cost-effective, sustainable building solutions. Operating on a shoestring budget, we leveraged our complementary skills, my construction knowledge, and her environmental expertise to offer something unique in the local market. Our first client's project completed successfully, coming in slightly under budget, while achieving significant energy efficiency improvements. This led to our first referral, a homeowner wanting to renovate with sustainable materials. We gradually built a small portfolio of completed projects, documenting the process and outcomes meticulously to use in future proposals. Tom proved to be more than just an employer. He became a valuable ally. He allowed us to use his office for client meetings, introduced us to contractors open to green building methods, and provided insights into material costs and availability that helped us create realistic budgets. "You two are on to something," he remarked, watching us prepare for a client presentation. "Contractors coming in asking about those materials you specified on the Henderson project. Say the homeowners are specifically requesting them now." Working at the lumberyard while building Greenbuild taught me aspects of the construction industry I'd never fully appreciated at Matthews Construction. I learned about supply chain challenges, developed relationships with material suppliers, and gained firsthand knowledge of what builders needed from consultants to make sustainable projects successful. Emma suggested we enter the Regional Sustainable Building Design Competition, an annual event that showcased innovative approaches to eco-friendly construction. The winning design would receive publicity industry recognition and a cash prize that could help fund Greenbuild's growth. "We can't afford not to enter," she argued. "It's the perfect platform to demonstrate our approach." Despite working full-time at the lumberyard and handling our growing client base, I spent evenings and weekends developing our competition entry, a moderate-sized family home, designed with passive solar principles, renewable materials, and energy systems that could be built using conventional construction methods at a reasonable cost. The key innovation wasn't any single feature, but the integrated approach showing builders how sustainability could be incorporated without specialized skills or exorbitant costs. This was exactly the middle ground I tried to advocate for at Matthews Construction. The weeks leading up to the competition submission deadline were exhausting but exhilarating. For the first time since leaving home, I felt truly purposeful, creating something that represented my own vision, rather than fighting to modify someone else's. A month before the competition, I encountered Jake at a building supply convention. I was attending to research new materials. The surprise on his face when he saw me manning a small green build information table was almost comical. "Ryan," he said awkwardly, glancing around as if worried about being seen talking to me. "You look good." "Thanks," I replied, unsure how to navigate this unexpected reunion. "How are things at Matthews?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Challenging. We lost the credit union project and the West Side development. Dad's been difficult." I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication, that my warnings had proven accurate concern for the company I'd grown up in, and lingering hurt over Jake's silence during my exile. "I heard you started something new," Jake continued, nodding toward the green build materials. "Sustainable design, huh?" "It's what I was trying to implement at Matthews," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Turns out there's a market for it." Jake looked like he wanted to say more, but was interrupted by a colleague calling him back to the Matthews construction booth. "I should go. Dad would—" He trailed off, not needing to complete the thought. "I understand," I said. And I did. The weight of Dad's expectations and disapproval was something I knew intimately. As Jake walked away, I noticed he took one of the Greenbuild brochures, folding it carefully into his pocket. That small gesture, his silent acknowledgement of interest in what I was building, stayed with me long after the convention ended. The encounter reinforced my determination to make Greenbuild a success, not just to prove Dad wrong, but to demonstrate there was another way forward, one that honored traditional construction knowledge while embracing necessary innovations. Emma and I submitted our competition entry 2 days before the deadline, exhausted, but confident in the work we'd produced. The regional competition was the most prestigious green building event in the area, with judges from major architecture firms, environmental organizations, and construction companies. Simply being selected as finalists would give Greenbuild credibility we couldn't buy with our limited resources. 3 weeks later, we received the notification Greenbuild Design had been selected as one of 5 finalists. We would present our design at the Sustainable Building Expo the following month, competing against established firms with years of experience and substantial resources. "We're the underdogs," Emma said, reading through the list of other finalists. "But sometimes that's an advantage. No one will see us coming." I was scanning the same list when a familiar name stopped me cold: Matthews Construction. Apparently, Dad had decided to enter the competition as well, perhaps recognizing the changing market forces I'd been highlighting all along. The irony was almost too perfect: father and son competing, directly advocating different visions for the future of building. The month before the expo was a blur of preparation. We refined our presentation, gathered material samples, and created detailed cost analyses showing the long-term savings of our approach. I continued working at the lumberyard, grateful for the steady income, but increasingly stretched thin between my day job and Greenbuild responsibilities. Tom noticed my exhaustion after a particularly long night of preparation. "You know," he said casually, "I've been thinking about expanding our sustainable building materials section. Might need someone to manage that full time. Someone who understands both sides of the equation." The offer was clear: a position that would align with my Greenbuild work and provide more flexibility. It was another unexpected kindness in a journey that had been full of them. People seeing value in what I offered and creating opportunities where they could. "I'd be interested," I said, trying to contain my relief at the prospect of focusing more fully on sustainable building. "Very interested." As the competition approached, I found myself thinking about Dad more frequently. Would he be surprised to see me as a finalist? Angry, perhaps even proud in some small way I hadn't spoken to him since the night he threw me out, though I'd heard updates through industry contacts and my brief exchange with Jake. Part of me hoped for some form of reconciliation, while another part was determined to succeed completely independently of his approval. The day of the expo arrived with perfect dramatic timing, exactly 12 weeks after I'd walked out of my childhood home, with nothing but a hastily packed duffel bag. Emma and I arrived early to set up our presentation booth, arranging material samples and technical specifications, alongside vibrant renderings of our design. As other competitors set up around us, I caught sight of Matthews Construction's booth across the exhibition hall. Dad was directing the setup, gesturing emphatically as employees arranged their display. He hadn't seen me yet, and I took the moment to observe him unnoticed. He looked older somehow, the lines around his mouth deeper than I remembered his movements, holding a tension that hadn't been there before. Jake stood nearby nodding at Dad's instructions, while glancing surreptitiously in my direction. Our eyes met briefly before he quickly looked away, but not before I recognized something unexpected in his expression. Respect, perhaps even admiration. The hours before our presentation were filled with networking and explaining our approach to interested attendees. I noticed several people moving between our booth and Matthews Constructions, comparing the two approaches. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Dad's display emphasized traditional quality and proven methods with a few green elements added as features, while ours integrated sustainability into the fundamental design process. As we prepared for our formal presentation to the judges, I finally came face to face with Dad in the hallway outside the presentation room. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. "Ryan," he acknowledged stiffly, as if we were casual acquaintances rather than estranged family. "Dad," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the sudden tightness in my chest. "I didn't expect to see Matthews Construction here." "The market changes. We adapt." His tone was defensive, as if admitting something shameful. "That's what I was trying to tell you all along." I couldn't help the words from slipping out immediately, regretting their accusatory edge. Dad's expression hardened. "Good luck with your presentation," he said formally, moving past me without further comment. It wasn't the confrontation or reconciliation I might have imagined, but the brief exchange crystallized something important. I no longer needed his approval. Whether Greenbuild won or lost today, I had already succeeded in creating something valuable on my own terms. Our presentation to the judges went remarkably well. Emma opened with the environmental benefits, and I followed with detailed explanations of how our design integrated sustainable elements without sacrificing constructability or affordability. The judges asked challenging questions, but our preparation paid off. We had anticipated most of their concerns and provided concrete data supporting our assertions. From the back of the room, I noticed Jake watching intently, taking notes. Dad was noticeably absent, presumably preparing for Matthews Construction's presentation scheduled after ours. When the judges announced the finalists later that afternoon, Greenbuild Design had secured second place, an extraordinary achievement for a fledgling company competing against established firms. Matthews Construction was not among the winners, a fact that brought complicated emotions. Professional validation, yes, but also concern for the family business and the employees who depended on it. As we accepted our recognition and the modest prize money local media gathered for interviews, a reporter from the Business Journal asked about Greenbuild's approach and my background in the industry. "You previously worked at Matthews Construction, correct? That's one of your competitors today. Any connection there?" I paused, considering how to answer. "Matthews Construction is where I learned the fundamentals of quality building," I said carefully. "Greenbuild builds on that foundation while exploring new approaches to sustainability. There's room in the industry for both traditional methods and innovation." It was a diplomatic response, extending an olive branch while asserting our distinct identity. Whether Dad would see it that way remained to be seen, but it reflected my genuine belief that the conflict between us had always been unnecessary. Our approaches could have been complementary rather than oppositional. The unexpected success of the competition catalyzed Greenbuild's growth. A developer who had attended our presentation approached us about consulting on an eco-friendly townhome project, our largest potential contract by far. With the competition prize money and growing client base, we could finally afford to lease a small office space and consider hiring our first employee. As I stood in our new office, a modest space, but one filled with possibility, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months, from homelessness to business owner, from rejected son to respected industry innovator. The path had been painful, but had led to something I might never have built otherwise. What I didn't know then was that the most challenging confrontation with my past still lay ahead, one that would test both my professional resolve and personal capacity for forgiveness. The regional competition success propelled Greenbuild from obscure startup to recognized innovator almost overnight. Local media coverage highlighted our sustainable design approach, particularly our emphasis on practical implementation methods that conventional builders could adopt without specialized training or equipment. With our new office established and our first employee hired a recent architecture graduate named Alex, who specialized in energy modeling, Emma and I developed a structured consulting process to handle our growing client inquiries. Tom shifted my role at the lumber yard to focus exclusively on sustainable materials, allowing me to balance both positions, while Greenbuild built financial stability. The townhome development project became our anchor client, providing consistent revenue as we expanded our services to include smaller residential renovations and commercial retrofits. Each successful project added to our portfolio and reinforced our core message: sustainability could be practical, affordable, and beneficial for builders and clients alike. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly word would spread through the local construction community, including to Matthews Construction's clients and subcontractors. I made a point of never directly competing with Dad's company or approaching their established clients, focusing instead on projects specifically seeking sustainable options. 3 months after the competition, I received an unexpected call from Jake asking to meet privately. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our respective offices, neutral territory, for what I assumed would be an awkward conversation. Jake arrived looking tired, the confident posture he typically maintained replaced by obvious strain. After brief pleasantries, he got straight to the point. "Matthews Construction is in trouble," he said, voice low, despite the empty tables around us. "Serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, concern overriding our estrangement. "Financial primarily, but reputation too." Jake stirred his coffee absently. "After the competition, several major clients started asking about sustainable options. When Dad dismissed their concerns, they went elsewhere. 3 major contracts canceled in the past month alone." I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication, that my market assessment had been correct, concern for the company's employees, and lingering hurt over my father's rejection. "I'm sorry to hear that, but what does this have to do with me?" Jake looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "We need your help, Ryan. The company needs your expertise." The request was so unexpected I nearly laughed. "You're kidding, right? Dad kicked me out, literally told me I was no longer his son because I suggested exactly what you're asking for now." "I know," Jake acknowledged, having the grace to look ashamed. "I should have stood up for you then. I was wrong." His admission surprised me. Jake and I had never been close, our relationship complicated by Diane's subtle favoritism and Dad's different expectations for us. This vulnerability was unprecedented. "Dad doesn't know I'm meeting you," he continued. "He's still stubborn. But he's also scared. Matthew's Construction is his life's work, and it's crumbling because he can't adapt." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, though without the conviction I might have felt weeks earlier. "I have my own company now, my own clients." "I know you don't owe us anything," Jake pressed. "But there are 50 people who might lose their jobs if the company fails. People who had nothing to do with how Dad treated you." He was fighting dirty, appealing to my sense of responsibility for the employees I'd worked alongside for years. It was working. "What exactly are you asking for?" I asked finally. "Just look at our situation. Give us your assessment of what it would take to incorporate sustainable practices and recapture market share. After that, it's up to Dad whether he takes your advice." I considered the request carefully. Despite everything, Matthews Construction was still part of my history, still the place where I'd learned the fundamentals of building. The company's failure would affect not just my father, but dozens of families who depended on those jobs. "I'll review your financials and current projects," I agreed reluctantly. "But I'm not coming back, Jake. I'll provide a consultation as I would for any client, and that's it." Relief washed over his face. "That's all I'm asking. Thank you." Over the next week, Jake secretly provided company financial records, current project specifications, and client feedback. The picture they painted was worse than he had described. Matthews Construction had lost not just recent contracts, but long-standing clients who had grown frustrated with Dad's inflexibility. Cash reserves were dangerously low, and morale among employees was plummeting as layoffs seemed increasingly likely. I developed a comprehensive proposal for transitioning Matthews Construction toward more sustainable practices while maintaining their reputation for quality and reliability. The plan included phased implementation, targeted training for existing employees, strategic marketing to recapture lost clients, and clear financial projections showing potential return on investment. When the proposal was complete, Jake arranged a meeting at Matthews Construction offices after hours when only key management would be present. What he failed to mention was that Dad had no idea I would be there. Walking into the familiar conference room felt surreal, like returning to a childhood home now occupied by strangers. Dad's expression when he saw me enter behind Jake cycled rapidly from confusion to anger to something unreadable. "What is this?" he demanded, looking between Jake and the other managers present. "We need help, Dad," Jake said firmly. "Ryan has expertise we need right now. Just listen to what he has to say." "I don't need advice from—" "Yes, you do," Jake interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically assertive. "The company is 6 weeks from bankruptcy if we don't change course. If you won't listen for your own sake, then listen for mine and everyone else who works here." The room fell silent. In all my years at Matthews Construction, I had never heard anyone interrupt Dad during a meeting, let alone challenge him directly. That it came from Jake, who had always been careful to remain in Dad's good graces, seemed to shock Dad into momentary compliance. Taking advantage of the opening, I began presenting my analysis and recommendations, keeping my tone professional and objective. I outlined the market shifts that had led to their current situation, the specific client concerns that had resulted in lost contracts, and the strategic changes needed to regain competitive position. "This isn't about abandoning traditional quality construction," I explained, addressing Dad's core concern directly. "It's about enhancing that foundation with sustainable practices that clients are demanding and competitors are already providing." Throughout my presentation, Dad remained silent, his expression unreadable. The other managers asked thoughtful questions, clearly engaged with the possibilities I was outlining. Even Diane, who had arrived partway through, listened attentively, her usual dismissiveness replaced by worried calculation as she absorbed the financial projections. When I finished, the room was quiet for a long moment before Dad finally spoke. "And what would your role be in all this? You want your job back, is that it?" The question revealed how fundamentally he misunderstood my motivation. "I don't want my job back," I said plainly. "I have my own company now, but I'm willing to consult during the transition, help train your team, and develop the necessary specifications and processes." "For a fee, I assume," he said, his tone suggesting I was capitalizing on their vulnerability. "Yes, for a standard consulting fee," I confirmed. "This would be a professional arrangement, not a family favor." Dad stood abruptly. "I need time to consider this." He left without further comment, Diane following close behind. Jake approached as the room emptied. "That went better than expected," he said, attempting optimism. "Did it?" I wasn't convinced. He didn't say no immediately. For Dad, that's practically enthusiasm. I gathered my materials, emotionally drained from the confrontation, but also feeling a strange sense of closure. I had presented my vision clearly and professionally, without the emotional baggage that had characterized our previous discussions. Whether Dad accepted the proposal or not, I had done what I could with integrity. 2 days later, Jake called. Dad wanted to meet again, this time at a neutral location, a restaurant where we had occasionally had family dinners in better times. I arrived prepared for rejection determination, to maintain my professional demeanor regardless of the outcome. Dad was already seated when I arrived, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. We ordered coffee and sat in uncomfortable silence until he finally spoke. "Your proposal is sound." He admitted the words clearly difficult for him. "The managers unanimously support implementing your recommendations." I nodded, waiting for the inevitable but. "I've built this company a certain way for 30 years, he continued. "Changing direction now feels like admitting I was wrong all along." It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever shared with me. "It's not about right or wrong, Dad," I said carefully. "It's about evolution. What worked perfectly 10 years ago might need adjustment now. That doesn't invalidate what you built." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between resignation and recognition. We'd like to engage Greenbuild as consultants for the transition. Professional terms as you suggested. No family complications. I can work with that. I agreed, maintaining my composure, despite the emotional weight of the moment. This wasn't reconciliation, not really, but it was acknowledgement of my expertise, my business, and the validity of my approach. As we discussed the practical details of the consulting arrangement, I realized we were finding a new way to communicate through the shared language of construction and business, without the emotional triggers that had characterized our previous relationship. It wasn't the relationship I had once hoped for, but it was workable, professional, and perhaps all that was possible given our history. The consulting engagement was structured with clear boundaries and expectations. I would work with Matthew's construction management team 2 days per week, helping develop sustainable building specifications, train personnel, and update marketing materials to reflect the new direction. Greenbuild would remain entirely separate, with Emma managing our existing clients, while I divided my time. Over the following weeks, I witnessed something I hadn't expected: Matthew's construction employees embracing the changes with enthusiasm and creativity. Many had privately supported sustainable approaches, but had been reluctant to challenge Dad's established methods. Given permission to innovate, they brought forward ideas and solutions I hadn't considered. Dad remained somewhat distant during this period, participating in meetings, but rarely engaging directly with me. Jake, however, became an unexpected ally, championing the transition and mediating when tensions arose. He seemed to be finding his own voice in the process, stepping out of the role of favored son and into a genuine leadership position. The first project implemented under the new approach, a renovation for a longtime client who had been considering moving their business elsewhere, became a testing ground for our integrated methods. When the client enthusiastically approved the sustainable elements we proposed, I saw something shift in Dad's perspective. Theory had become reality, and the market response was undeniable. Diane, ever pragmatic, adjusted her position as the financial benefits became apparent. Ryan has certainly brought valuable expertise to the table, she commented during a family dinner I had reluctantly agreed to attend. The Henderson project specifications were particularly impressive. It wasn't an apology for her role in my expulsion from the family, but it was an acknowledgement of my professional value, the closest to approval she had ever offered. 6 months into the consulting engagement, Matthew's construction had stabilized financially and begun rebuilding its reputation in the local market. Greenbuild continued to thrive independently, with our client base expanding beyond the immediate region, as our competition success led to industry recognition. The National Sustainable Design Competition was approaching, and both companies had qualified to enter. Rather than competing against each other, Jake suggested something unexpected: a collaborative entry combining Matthews Construction's established reputation for quality with Greenbuild's innovative sustainability approach. A joint project would make a stronger statement than either company could make alone, he argued. Plus, it would show the industry that sustainable building isn't just for boutique firms; established companies can evolve too. The proposal made business sense, though the personal implications were complicated. Working directly with Dad on a high-profile project would test our fragile professional relationship and potentially reopen old wounds. But the opportunity to demonstrate our integrated approach on a national stage was too significant to dismiss. When I brought the idea to Emma, her response surprised me. "I think you should do it," she said, "not just for business reasons, but for closure. Whatever happens, you'll have shown your father what you're capable of creating with or without his approval." She was right, as she often was, about the emotional undercurrents I tried to ignore. This wasn't just about a competition entry or business strategy. It was about completing a circle, returning to the beginning of the conflict with new strength and perspective. The collaborative project became a catalyst for gradual personal reconciliation. Working side by side on design specifications, Dad and I found moments of connection through shared problem solving. Small acknowledgments replaced our previous pattern of criticism and defensiveness. His nod of approval when I resolved a difficult engineering challenge, my recognition of his expertise in structural considerations. "Your mother would be proud of what you've built," he said unexpectedly one evening as we finalized the competition entry. "She always said you had vision." The comment, offered without fanfare, cracked something open between us, not healing the rift entirely, but creating space for something new to grow. For the first time since being forced out, I could see the possibility of a relationship defined by mutual respect rather than unmet expectations. The national competition presentation became the public representation of this private shift. Standing together at the podium, father and son presenting complementary aspects of our integrated design approach, we demonstrated not just innovative building methods, but the power of combining experience with fresh perspective. When the judges awarded our joint entry second place nationally, a remarkable achievement for regional firms, the industry recognition was satisfying. But more meaningful was Dad's handshake afterward, firm and genuine, acknowledging our shared accomplishment. "We built something good here," he said simply. We had not just a competition entry, but a bridge between past and future, between tradition and innovation. It wasn't the seamless transition I had once envisioned, but the painful separation had created space for both of us to grow in ways that might otherwise have been impossible. Looking back now, a year after the night my father told me to get out and never come back, I barely recognize the person I was then. I had defined myself almost entirely through my role at Matthews Construction, measuring my worth by my father's approval. Losing that forced me to discover who I was outside his shadow. Greenbuild Design has grown beyond what I could have imagined in those first desperate days. We now employ 6 people full-time with a diverse portfolio of projects ranging from residential renovations to commercial developments. Our focus remains the same, bridging the gap between traditional construction and sustainable innovation, making green building accessible and practical. The consulting relationship with Matthews Construction evolved into a formal partnership on certain projects, allowing both companies to maintain their distinct identities while collaborating where our strengths complement each other. Dad has gradually embraced sustainable methods, finding ways to integrate them, with his emphasis on craftsmanship and durability. Last month, I closed on my own home, a modest but well-designed space, where I've implemented many of the sustainable features I've advocated for professionally. The purchase represents more than just financial stability. It's tangible proof that I've built something lasting from what initially felt like devastation. My relationship with Dad remains complex, the damage not entirely repaired. We probably won't ever have the easy father-son bond some people enjoy. But we found a new way to relate as professionals with shared industry knowledge and different but valuable perspectives. There are still awkward moments and occasional tensions, but also surprising instances of connection and mutual respect. Jake and I have developed a relationship independent of our father's influence, discovering common ground neither of us had recognized before. He's taken on a leadership role in Matthews Construction's sustainable division, showing unexpected aptitude for balancing traditional methods with innovation. Even Diane has moderated her approach, though I maintain careful boundaries in our interactions. Family dinners have cautiously resumed, initially tense, but gradually finding a new rhythm that acknowledges past wounds without reopening them constantly. Tom Wilson became not just a mentor, but an investor in Greenbuild, his practical knowledge of materials and supplier relationships proving invaluable as we've expanded. "Always knew you'd build something worthwhile," he told me when we finalized the investment agreement. "Just needed the push to do it on your own terms." Emma's role evolved from business partner to something more personal, our shared vision for sustainable building, creating a foundation for a deeper connection. Her perspective helps me maintain balance, reminding me that success isn't measured solely by professional achievements or family approval. The national competition recognition led to an invitation to speak at industry conferences, positioning Greenbuild as a thought leader in practical sustainability. Standing at the podium at my first major presentation, I glanced into the audience and saw Dad sitting in the back row. He hadn't mentioned attending, but his presence and the slight nod he gave when our eyes met conveyed something words couldn't express. That moment crystallized the most important lesson of this journey. Sometimes rejection becomes redirection to a better path. Being forced out of the comfortable but constraining role I'd occupied cleared the way for growth I couldn't have achieved otherwise. The very thing that felt like destruction became the foundation for something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more fulfilling. Had I stayed at Matthews Construction continually fighting for incremental changes within my father's framework, I might never have fully developed my own vision or discovered my capacity for independent creation. The painful separation, while not what either of us would have chosen, ultimately benefited us both, forcing Dad to confront necessary changes to the business and giving me the opportunity to build something truly my own. This isn't to say the hurt wasn't real, or that being kicked out was somehow a blessing in disguise. The rejection was devastating, the struggles that followed, genuinely difficult. But I've learned that sometimes the most significant growth happens not when we're nurtured, but when we're challenged beyond what we think we can endure. Today, when I look at the thriving business I've built, the home I've created, and the relationships I've either repaired or established anew, I feel a sense of ownership over my life that I never experienced when following the path laid out for me. The forced departure became an unexpected beginning, painful, but ultimately transformative. If there's any wisdom I can offer from this experience, it's this: sometimes the moments that feel like our greatest failures are actually the universe clearing the way for something better. When doors close, even when they're slammed in our face by the people we thought would always support us, new ones eventually open if we have the courage to keep moving forward. Have you ever experienced a rejection that ultimately led to unexpected growth, or had to rebuild your life after a major setback? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about resilience and reinvention. Share this with someone who might be struggling with their own unexpected new beginning right now. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the best way forward is the path you create yourself.